Oh, I forgot to add myself to the stream there. Right, good morning and welcome to Elevenses. It's show number 363. It's Sunday the 3rd of September, so it is the first day of autumn. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Schools Ride Training, and this is my twice weekly webcast. So what have I got for you today in the Motorcycle News Tips and Views show? Fuel in London is as expensive as in the Outer Hebrides. Can you believe it? Rental e-scooters have been removed from the streets of Paris. Uber is launching an e-taxibike service in Kenya. Electric off-road centre, it gets planning go-ahead in Wales, and the sad news that Paul Bird, the principal of Paul Bird Racing, has sadly passed away. And we've got a 400 middleweight 500cc fest for you today, looking at 3 new bikes that have been launched in that class from CFMoto, KTM, who've updated their 390, and the forthcoming RS440 Aprilia, which is apparently set to release in just a few days' time. And then finally, we'll have a quick look at the increasing costs of fixing vehicle technology when it goes wrong. We'll actually ask whether some of the tech which is appearing on machines at the moment is actually worth the bother. And Aaron has arrived in the show. Good morning to Aaron, and he has in fact referenced Paul Bird there. Yes, indeed, rest in peace. Right, okay, so stay with me for the next 30 odd minutes as I take you through some topical news, some possibly controversial views, and give you that in-depth look at some technology. Right, so alright, on with the first item of the show. I will just remind you, or just give a quick shout out actually to my Ko-fi supporters who've helped me this week. So don't forget, if you've got a question, comment, anything you want to ask, do drop me a line. But many thanks to Hallam, Charles Keitel, Helen, Hallam, Paul, Margaret, who is a fresh subscriber, so very grateful to you, Margaret, Brian, Ian, Brian, and Anonymous. They've all supported me over the past week on my Ko-fi page. So if you're not yet a supporter, why not pop over and have a look at the page and see what's on offer. Right, just a reminder of what's in today's show. Okay, what can we talk about today to start with? I'm just getting my news banner up. I wasn't quite pre-prepared this morning as I normally am. Don't know why, I have plenty of time. Anyway, petrol pumps. If you've looked at the prices of petrol as you've gone past a petrol pump in the last few weeks, you will probably noticed that the pump prices in the UK have been edging upwards again. And the interesting thing is, as I noted on a trip up to Scotland last year, the cheapest fuel isn't always where you might expect it. And not only did I get a pretty cheap fill up in Fort William, which is hardly the centre of the country, the least pricey fill up on the journey was at a tiny independent petrol station, just 2 petrol pumps I think, in Grassington in Yorkshire. Now this year I noticed that fuel prices down in Devon last month were significantly lower than they are here in London, and in fact the confused.com fuel index currently shows that the best price on petrol on the mainland Britain is actually Torquay. Now, where's the most expensive fuel? Well, at around 10p a litre price here, the top 5 locations are Outer Hebrides and Orkney, perhaps not very surprising as they are islands off the coast of Scotland, and so getting fuel there is going to be a bit of a logistic problem. But the 3 other highest prices were found in central London, in Twickenham and in Sutton, which of course are both in outer London. Now my local petrol station E10 unleaded has climbed back to around 157 pence per litre. That's around 5p above the national average apparently, so if you're paying that, good luck to you, but spare a thought for the price of a fill up here in London. Now, something that you don't need to fill with petrol, of course, are e-scooters, and the news is that 5 years after Paris became the first European city to have rented e-scooters, Paris is becoming the first European city to clear them off the streets again. Now, on Thursday afternoon, the last of the city's 15,000 e-scooters were collected by vans. And this marks the end of the 5-year rental e-scooter experiment. It's true that the scooters, which could be booked by app, were widely used, but there were safety concerns for pedestrians because pavements were being blocked by abandoned e-scooters, and that was combined with questions about whether they were actually having any positive benefits for the environment. Now, Paris withdrew some operator licenses. They introduced stricter regulations, which included automatic tracking and speed limiters. But that wasn't enough to calm the debate, and when Mayor Anne Hidalgo called a referendum in April, though just 7.5% of the people voted, of that small number, almost 90% came out in favour of banning them. So City Hall believes Paris's public transport network and cycling will actually replace many of the short e-scooter journeys. But it does seem that in Paris it will be possible to continue to use privately owned scooters. And I assume that the reasoning on this is that e-scooter owners are less likely to leave them abandoned mid-pavement where they are a significant trip hazard, particularly to partially or sight impaired people. They're unlikely to actually abandon them. They will take them somewhere safe and look after them. I guess that's the theory on this one. Meanwhile, on Thursday, Uber, who are known better probably for their car ride-hailing services, now they launched an electric motorcycle taxi service in Kenya. This is a photo snipped from their launch video. It's the first of its kind in Africa from Uber. It's likely to be followed by other countries in the sub-Saharan region, and their fleet of electric bodas, that's the Swahili word for taxi, I think, is likely to grow to around 3,000 bikes within 6 months, and that's 1/5 of the entire existing fleet of taxi bikes. Uber say reduced operating costs to the rider will result in lower hire costs as well. Now, Kenya is interesting actually, because believe it or not, the country generates more than 90% of its power from renewable sources, which makes the current state of things here in the UK look pretty miserable, doesn't it? They've been positioning themselves as a leader in Africa's shift to green transport, and one of the opportunities that local firms have seen is to set up battery swap stations in the major cities. Kenya's President William Ruto said last month that he wanted to see the number of electric bikes on the road increase from the current 2,000 to more than 200,000 by the end of 2024. That's a pretty darned ambitious target. It puts the current state of play in the UK really into perspective, I think. Right, so, okay, what else have we got for you? Well, don't forget, if you have a question, do drop me a line. I'm happy to get back to you at the end of it. If you are watching the show live, that's great. If you can't watch it live, if you can't be here at 11 o'clock for any reason, do pop over to my YouTube channel and you can catch all the shows there in their own little playlist after the event. So just because you've missed it live doesn't mean you've missed the show. They're all over on my YouTube channel, which is Survival Skills UK. Don't forget that all important UK on the end, or you won't find my channel. Right, okay, so what else have we got in the news? Well, a first-class electric off-road motorcycle and trials training facility based near Kenarth, I think it's pronounced that way, in Wales, apologies if it isn't, has been given the go-ahead to keep running by county planners, despite objections from the authority's Highways and Environmental Services Department on the grounds that amongst other things, that they had substandard access to the nearby public road. The aim of the Dryden Off-Road Centre, means electricity in Welsh, is to move away from conventional petrol engine machines and to replace them with electric off-road trials machines from OSET. Now, Dryden Off-Road Centre is listed as an OSET off-road academy. There are only 2 in the UK, and they've already invested £30,000 in bikes and safety equipment. Now, what the things they're keen to stress here is that trials is not a speed-related sport. The statement from the facility pointed this out. It said trials is the safest form of motorsport requiring skilled control of throttle, brakes and balance. And they feel that, quote, given the opportunity, we could work in partnership with local schools and with special needs children and adults to provide a very rewarding and confidence building experience. Well, that's an interesting plan indeed. Right, now some sad news. As I mentioned at the top of the show, Paul Bird, that's a name who will be familiar to anyone who's followed the British Superbike Championship for the last 20 odd years. Now, sadly, it was reported that he passed away on Friday in hospital after a short illness. Now, as the owner of Paul Bird Motorsport, PBM, it was the series' most successful team. He was said to be a passionate supporter of the sport, and the fact is he developed and encouraged on their way many of the top riders in the UK. And his current team of Glenn Irwin and Tommy Bridewell look to be heading to yet another British Superbike Championship win, and that would be his team's 9th, and Paul Bird was 56. So, right, okay, what's new in this show about motorcycles? Well, it's actually a bit of a middleweight fest of new bikes this week, with news of new models from CFMoto, KTM and Aprilia. They're all dropping into the increasingly hotly contended 35 kilowatt, 47 horsepower A2 license class. Now, Europe may be fairly small beer on the international stage, but the imposition of this license restriction certainly seems to have spurred a large number of motorcycle manufacturers to look at this intermediate class with fresh eyes. Obviously, there are the sort of the Enfields in the 350cc, but they're fairly lowly powered. But Honda came out with their range of 500s a decade or so ago now, which fit pretty much bang on the 47 horsepower limit and give you the option to ride a whole range of different motorcycles from the naked through to sort of the adventure bike 500, and many other companies obviously have contenders in the class. The latest we've just seen being Harley Davidson, who now have their X440, and Triumph with their pair of 400 singles. So, what's the latest to appear? Well, as we've said before, the Chinese manufacturers, that's completely the wrong picture. That's the correct picture. CFMoto are looking to break into the European market, and they have UK operations too, which are expanding, and here is their latest machine. It's their second contender in the A2 license class, the 450 SR, as a fully fed sports machine, and that's already available at the budget price of 5,600 plus on the road charges, and it's now joined by a new naked sibling, which you can see here, which is actually priced at a very wallet friendly £4,990. Now, I know a lot of people will be put off by the idea that it's Chinese, but frankly that price undercuts all the opposition. And the bike's not short of technology either. Now, it's a double overhead cam, 4-valve twin, and it comes with Bosch fuel injection. It gets a slip assist clutch. It's built around a 270 degree crankshaft, which you'll probably be familiar with. The MT-07, I believe, uses exactly the same arrangement, and it's got twin balancer shafts, so it should be pretty smooth, but with that sort of interesting sort of mock V-twin sort of just rumble. Now, 10,000 RPM, it comes in bang on the 35 kilowatt 47 horsepower limit, so it's A2 intermediate license holder rideable. Torque is quoted at 39 newton meters or 29 pound-feet, and that's all delivered through a 6-speed gearbox. Excuse me. Bike's fueled up weight. Well, Compared with the increasingly heavy machines we're seeing, it's a relative lightweight, 370 pounds or 168 kilograms. Tank's relatively small, 14 litres or 3.1 gallons, although as I'd expect to get 60 mpg plus out of it, it's not going to be that short in terms of range. The seat is an accessible 795mm, which is 31 inches. Suspension, now this is where it goes a little bit budget. They're upside down forks, they're non-adjustable. There is a single rear shock which is also non-adjustable. Wheels are 110 70 by 17 and there's 150 60 17 on the rear, so you should be able to get some decent rubber for it, because one of the interesting the budget choice on the bike really is the tyres, which are from CST excuse me, formerly known as Chen Sing. Now, so the front tyre might need an upgrade pretty quickly, as the stopping power up front comes from a radially mounted, it's a single disc, but it's gripped by a J. Juan front caliper. There's also a single piston floating rear caliper on a smaller disc at the back. ABS is standard, and there's also traction control available. So I do apologise for the coughing. It's my hay fever back again for some reason. I forgot to take a tablet this morning. So what do you get else on the bike? 5-inch TFT display. That's said to be an improved one, although as it's a new model, I'm not quite sure what it's improved over. You get the usual speed and tacho, clock, gear position indicator and fuel level. There's a toggle switch on the left switch cluster, and that gives access to other bits of information, the odometer, 2 trip meters, range, average speed, fuel consumption and average mph per trip. And it's also expected to provide navigation and mobile phone connectivity, plus the option to install a USB-C charging port for your devices. So it looks like the screen will be able to talk to a navigation app, for example. It's also being said that the machine comes with anti-theft and tracking capabilities, which is interesting, but I can't find any more information on that particular detail, so whether it's correct or not I cannot tell you. Anyway, more info on that on the CFMoto website if you're interested. Aaron says most bikes these days are built in facilities that have the same quality control as CFMoto. I mean, one of the things that people tend to forget is that an awful lot of parts that you find on supposedly premium motorcycles actually are sourced from China. So I think the gap has closed quite significantly since the days of sort of early 2000s when we were running some Chinese 125s from they were Suzuki's, and they were okay, but not the top quality. They weren't as good as the previous generation of Japanese machines, and a couple of Chinese scooters we foolishly tried at the recommendation of the shop selling us the stuff. They went back within a couple of weeks because they were so appallingly built. Anyway, one of the machines that CFMoto's 450 will go up against is the new 2024 KTM Duke. Now let's have a quick look at that. There it is. Now it's got a new engine and it's got a new chassis, and the updated model is said to represent a major step up in performance and capability compared with the version it replaces. Now there's always room, of course, for a bit of hyperbole in advertising, and KTM certainly doesn't seem to shy away from that. The LC4C engine is completely redesigned. It said it's now a full 399cc, up from the previous 373, and it has what KTM described as newly optimised cylinder head and gearbox. The bike meets the latest Euro 5 emission standards. But frankly, I'd hardly describe the power boost of 1.1 horsepower up from 44 to from 42.9, or a 2 Newton meter boost of torque that goes from 37 to 39. I hardly describe that as a significant increase. Frankly, if you eat a large burger and chips for lunch, you'll probably cancel it out completely. Now, the older machine, of course, had to be power restricted to meet the EU's power to weight ratio for the A2 license group, so just possibly the bike's revised steel trellis main frame, which is said to offer improved stiffness when it's needed and better feedback to the rider, is actually a little heavier. Something presumably has added a little bit of weight to the machine to allow them to boost the power. Now the new frame, it comes with new triple clamps, and that is a revised offset for the fork, so improved handling and stability they claim. The White Power Apex open cartridge front fork is 43mm in diameter, and unlike the fairly basic suspension we've just seen on the CFMoto, you do get 5-click adjustment on rebound and compression, so there's a bit to twiddle there if you are that way inclined. Similarly at the back, the split piston rear shock absorber also comes with adjustable preload and rebound, and interestingly it's now offset to one side, so it's something that we saw a long time ago on the Kawasaki ER6, an offset shock absorber. Lots of people wondered why they were doing it. Well, it makes it easier presumably to build the swing arm, and the suspension unit is actually a lot easier to access, and it's probably it can be fitted into bigger space, I would guess. And what they say is in fact that repositioning the shock actually allows them to put in a larger air box, because the shocks moving the shock has opened up space under the back of the tank there, and it also allows for a lower seat height. And it says the revised seat itself rests on a die-cast aluminium subframe, so if you do crash it and bend it, you can unbolt it and replace it, which is always good news. Now, new styling. You get tank spoilers with prominent air intakes, you get larger radiator covers, lights are LED, 5-inch TFT display with an enlarged RPM display, and a very useful lap timer, perfect for zipping around the roundabout, I guess. Now, what else do you get from the bike? Well, there is a slipper clutch, there's a quick shifter, there's a 6-speed manual gearbox, and you get a whole raft of enhanced electronics. Now you get cornering ABS, which I suspect might be a first for a bike that small. You get launch control. I'm sure you're going to need that with 44 horsepower. You could loop it, I suppose, if you're really brutal. But rain, street and track modes are standard. And it's said that the latter, the track mode, unlocks a world of hooliganism. And something that KTM have been somewhat controversial, in my view, showing off in their latest promotional video for the 390 and the Learn Illegal 125. And this is a still from that photo, and as you can see, the rider is doing a power slide, drifting it round the corner. Now, some people have said that it's just what's needed for motorcycling because it will appeal to younger riders, and that will be great because it will get people coming back into a recreational activity, which frankly is aging. My own feeling is that there are plenty of irresponsible riders around on the roads at the moment who simply don't need any encouragement from KTM to behave badly. Maybe I'm just old and boring, so let me know your views on that one. Right, Terry has popped in. Good morning, Terry, or good evening to you. Terry's in New Zealand. He says, genuinely interested in the new Triumph 400s. Yeah, me too, actually. The KTM 390, CFMoto and RS440 aren't styled for my age group. Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. I wouldn't mind one of the little 390 KTMs. I just wish they'd put a half fairing on it and turn it into a mini sort of tourer. And then it might be more my kind of bike. The rest of it I don't mind too much, but yeah, I'm not interested in sort of the hooligan activities. Right, okay, so that is the news for today. Don't forget, if you've got any questions, comments, I will get back to you during the show if I possibly can. If not actually during the show, I will come back to you afterwards. Right, so what else have we got to talk about? Well, we're ready for the in-depth piece now, and this is really based on some of. Oh, I've missed the Aprilia out, haven't I? What happened there? The Aprilia. Let's find a picture of the Aprilia. That I had it somewhere. I'm sure we had it earlier, didn't we? There it is. And dum-de-dum. Yes, I knew I'd forgotten something. Here we are, the Aprilia. There we go. So that's all we're seeing of the Aprilia. It's said to be definitely arriving as soon as next week, which would be interesting if it is. It's a 440. It's the RS machine. It has a similar silhouette to the RS660, so it's suspected to be a sort of a fairly easy riding sports bike. It's been seen out testing in India and in Italy, and this is the latest teaser. And one of the things that I was going to say, perhaps more interesting in some ways than the bike itself, which at least in a nerdy kind of way, it's said it's going to be fitted with a set of Indian-made TVS Eurogrip Pro Torque Extreme tyres. That's probably a world first, not just for the longest name of a tyre, but also for an Indian tyre to go onto a worldwide production model if they end up being fitted on them. Despite the Eurogrip name, it will mark the debut of those tyres outside of India. So, right, okay, that's what I wanted to say about that. So, on to the in-depth piece. Now, at the end of August, and this is something that Terry and I have actually discussed offline, Triumph proudly announced what they called their active preload reduction as a new feature to the Tiger 1200 range. Now, what does the Tiger 1200 look like? Well, I can hopefully remind you with a photograph of one. No, I can't. I somehow forgot to put that into the show. Oh, well, never mind. But what does this active preload reduction actually do? Well, it lowers the rear of the bike when you come to a stop, and it raises it again when you ride away. How much by? Well, a stunning 20 millimeters, 2 centimeters, or 0.78 of an inch. So roughly, it's about the thickness of my thumb. Something around about that. Now, I really did have to read that twice. I mean, it's claimed to offer the rider greater ease and confidence, quote unquote, and the new feature is going to be available to all existing 2023 Tiger 1200 customers via a software update. So how do you get that? Well, you actually have to go to your authorised Triumph dealer. You have to get a scheduled service done, and the good news is there will be no upgrade fee for existing customers to get this new feature if they want it, but you will of course have to pay dealership rates for your service. Now, frankly, I would say if you need to have your bike bouncing up and down underneath you every time you come to a stop, you're on the wrong bike. And as with a lot of this technology, I begin to ask, when now it's becoming fashion over function. You know, what's wrong with altering the preload on a machine by hand? Okay, you can't do it on the fly like these systems do, but the point is you can set the bike up to suit you statically, and you get the bike riding more to your convenience, I think, by doing it statically than by relying on the bike to sort of fiddle around with your ride height for you. Now, changing the preload on an old style shock is a bit of a pain in the backside, I'll happily admit that. It's out with the toolkit, if the manufacturer has supplied you with a toolkit, of course. And when you're looking at a monoshock which is centrally placed in the chassis, like it was on the 2019 Tracer 900 I was riding in New Zealand, it turned out to be downright impossible to get in there. The tool in the toolkit couldn't actually adjust the ring. I couldn't get to the ring to do the adjustment. The swing arm was in the way. The only way that I could see that I could get that job done was to get the rear wheel out to do it. And as it happened, I actually needed some extra preload on the rear fairly desperately, because what had happened was the bike had been almost brand new when I picked it up, and over the 3,000 miles I put on it, the rear shock had settled in. With a spring, they always compress a little bit from new, and what happened was the rear of the bike sagged, and I couldn't actually get it raised back up again. So that did impact the steering. It definitely impacted the ground clearance. And I happen to note, probably because of this issue, that the Tracer GT, the improved model with some extra bling, actually has a remote preload adjuster. Why on earth it's not on the standard bike, I have absolutely no idea. But instant convenience aside, my main worry is the moment you need electronics to perform a task that you could have done mechanically, whether that's with a spanner or whether it's a remote preload adjuster, which is either a cable or hydraulic, you open yourself up to a world of future pain. Now, although when you look at what goes wrong on modern cars, it's still the standard mechanical components that are most likely to fail. The figures show that more modern technology, such as parking sensors, are also on the list as a growing cause of complaint when they fail, and the fact is they are far more expensive to fix. Now, it's well known in the car industry that with increased tech going into cars, repair costs are generally on the rise. Doesn't matter whether it's parking cameras or the onboard Wi-Fi or the infotainment systems. This technology is all exceptionally expensive and time consuming to fix as and when it does break. And where do you get it fixed anyway? Now, how many garages can diagnose and repair the in-car tech? The answer is relatively few, because specialised equipment is generally needed to diagnose and fix these electrical problems. And for most, that means that you're going to have to take the vehicle back to your franchise dealer, and even those outfits generally don't have the ability to repair anything. What they actually mean, of course, is a replacement, and factory replacements for any piece of equipment on a vehicle don't come cheap. Now, on Friday, the US Ford Motor Company, they announced a recall of 169,000 vehicles. Why? Well, they need to replace faulty rear view cameras and to update the software that controls them. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the NHTSA, they said, unsurprisingly, that the loss of the rear view camera image could reduce the driver's rearward visibility, increasing the risk of a crash. So that's why the faulty cameras are subject to recall. And it's a recall for which Ford has set aside no less than $270 million. That's around $1,500 per car. Now, just ask yourself how much you'd have to pay if your rear view camera failed, out of warranty, or you somehow damaged it yourself and you had to replace it. It certainly wouldn't be what Ford are setting aside. And it's not just a trivial problem affecting a few cars. There was a recall in May of 422,000 vehicles in the US, and an earlier one, I think this was in January, which recalled another 462,000 vehicles worldwide. So that is 1 million vehicles which have now been recalled. And many of these vehicles have apparently been involved in multiple recalls to try to fix the same issue. Now, motorcycles are notoriously hard on electrical equipment. Anybody who's fitted a modern iPhone to a mount on their handlebars will know all about that. The vibration damages the camera on those phones, and of course motorcycles are exposed to the weather in a way that a car generally isn't. You basically are pressure washing a lot of the bike with rain, and of course spray and salt are flung into all sorts of inaccessible parts of the body of the bike, often where there are fairly delicate pieces of electrical equipment. It doesn't often go wrong, but when it does, when you've got something like an ABS failure, it is expensive to fix. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm no technophobe. I'm not in the least bit afraid of buying into new technology early if I think I can fix it. So I've had PCs since almost before they became affordable, in fact, but I still steered well clear of the Apple sort of system of making sealed devices that make them almost impossible to service by the average person. So I've generally stuck to devices where I can personally swap things in and out when it goes wrong. That applies to my PC. My current phone was specifically chosen because I can change the battery when I need to, and that was influenced very much by the previous phone, which was a sealed in Sony, and the battery failed on that and had to be replaced. I did manage to do it myself, but it wasn't a straightforward task. Why fit technology when at some point it can go wrong when it doesn't actually do anything that makes our lives easier. You know, keep it simple, stupid. What can go wrong with a mirror? Either it works or it doesn't work. And if it breaks, I know how to fix it, don't I? I can unbolt it and I can simply go out and replace it with another mirror, which I've bought for a few pounds. So sometimes I look at this technology and I think it's just asking to go wrong. And when it does, it is going to cost a shed load of money to the owner. Right, okay, so that's pretty much the end of the show. What's wrong with the glass with that special paint on the back? Yeah, silvering a mirror. Yes, I'm entirely in agreement there with you, Aaron. Thank you indeed for your comment there. Right, that is it for the end of the show today. We have got to the end of it. Just one missing picture, which I apologise. I'll stick it in the comments down below. Yeah, so where are we? Before I wrap up the show, thanks you for all those contributions on my Ko-fi page. But just a quick reminder for those who aren't aware of Ko-fi, if you're not yet a supporter, why not pop over to my page, have a look at what you can find over there, and I'm sure you will find some interesting content to read. Here's the link coming up. I think it's probably the biggest resource of better biking information anywhere on the web. There's everything from free articles, downloadable copies of some of my paperbacks, and short informative mini items too that you can buy from the shop over there. If you drop me a coffee, you get access to all the regular articles, which 10 years worth now have gone up over there, and you get your naming lights over here too. That's it for today. If you are riding out and about in the UK, it looks like a great day for riding almost across the entire UK. I think the far northwest looks like it could be a bit wet, and the forecast for at least the south of England for the next few days is looking like it's going to be warm and dry and very sunny indeed, perhaps very warm indeed, and that hopefully will last right through the week and into next weekend. So as often happens, it does look like September at least is starting on a high, literally. That's it. Thank you very much indeed for looking in. To all of you, your contributions are always welcome, both on the line and on my Facebook and Ko-fi pages. Always great to see what people have to say about the show. So if you are out there riding your bike today, do stay shiny side up.